Hello and welcome to Mahika Tutorials. In this tutorial, we are going to discuss how we can write a default and static method inside an interface. So far we have seen how we can give an abstract method in an interface. Now we will see default and static method in an interface. So first we will create an interface and then we will create the class which will implement that interface. So let us first create an interface. Now suppose if we have an interface A, and here we have one abstract, one default and one static method. So we will create three different methods. First abstract method and then default method. So for that we will use default keyword and then we will give our method. And default method is a concrete method. So for that we can give the body as well. So here we will add a message. Let's say M2 from interface A. Okay. Similarly, we will add a static method. So for static method, again static keyword will be used and then we can give the method definition. So here we will give a message. Let's say M3 from interface A. Okay. Now we will create a class which will implement that interface. So for that we will add a class. So here we will give test. We need a main method and then we will finish it. So now when we say class test implements the interface A. Okay, now here we are getting error. Why? Because this interface has one abstract method which is this M1 method. So abstract methods are mandatory to be overridden. So here what we will do, we will add the unimplemented method. That is, we are overriding M1 method. But for the remaining two methods, M2 and M3, no code has been added in this class. Why? Because these two are concrete methods, that is, they have their definition. Default methods may or may not be overridden by the class which is implementing that interface. So this test class, if not overriding that, then also it is okay. And static method cannot be overridden, so it can only be called. So let us try to call these methods. We will first add a message to our M1 method, M1 from test. Okay, now we know we need to create first instance of our class and then we can call these methods. So we will first instantiate our test class, test t equals new test. Okay, and now here we will call the methods t dot m1 and then we need to call the default method, so we can again give t dot m2. Okay, and to invoke static method we need to call the method with the name of interface. That is, we can invoke m3 by giving the name of the interface which is a dot m3. Okay, so this is how we can call a static method of an interface. Now let us execute this and verify our output. Okay, m1 from test, m2 from interface A and m3 from interface A. Now we say that a default method may or may not be overridden by the class which is implementing that interface. Now suppose if this class overrides the M2 method which is default in interface, then what happens in that case? Okay, our method is public void M2. All methods are public by default in an interface. Okay, so here we can add a message. Let's say M2 from test. Okay, so now we are overriding the default method M2 which was in interface A. Now when we will execute our code, then this M2 method from class test will be invoked rather than from the interface. So we will not get this message M2 from interface A. Rather than that we will get this message M2 from test. Let's execute it and verify our output. See, M2 from test. Okay, so if a class overrides the default method, then it will be called from the class itself. Now, what if we try to override the static method which is given in interface? Now here we will try to override the method M3 of our interface. We will give public void M3. Okay. Now here we are getting error. Why? Because static methods cannot be overridden. We can simply call them in our class, but we cannot override them. Default method may or may not be overridden, and they were introduced so that new functionalities can be added to interface without making the change in the existing classes which implement those interfaces. That is, interfaces can be extended without modifying the classes. So here we cannot perform this operation. Fine. Now what if we have the class which implements more than one interface and which have common default methods? So we will create another interface and then we will discuss this scenario. So we will create a new interface. Let's suppose B. Okay. Now here we will add again a default method. Let it be with the same name, void M2. And since this is a default method, we should give default keyword over there. So it will be default M2 and then we can define the body for this method. We will add a message. Let's say M2 from interface B. Okay. So now interface A and interface B both have default method M2. Now let's move to our class. Here what we will do, suppose if this class does not overrides this default method. So far it is okay because right now our class is implementing only one interface A. Now what if our class implements interface B as well? Now here we are getting error, that is whenever we have multiple inheritance through interfaces and if the interfaces consist of common default methods, like here we have default void M2 and here again we have default void M2, then in that case it becomes mandatory for the class to override the default method. So either we can select this option, that is to override the default method in A, or to override the default method in B. Let's suppose if we select this. Now here this M2 has been overridden in the class test, and from here this is the call to the M2 method from interface A using super keyword. Okay, so now if we run this code, we will get the method M2 called from interface A. Okay, if we make a change over there, if we change the name of the interface, then it will call the method from that particular interface. We can make it B. Okay, so now if we run our code, we are getting M2 from interface B call. Okay, so in case of multiple inheritance through interfaces, if the interfaces have common default methods, then it becomes mandatory for the class to implement to override that particular default method. Like here we are overriding the method M2, and from this method if we want, we may call the method from that particular interface by giving the name of the interface, super keyword and name of the method. So this is how default and static methods works in an interface. Thank you for watching this tutorial. Please subscribe the channel for more updates.